James is telling us that you need to stop slandering and gossiping and lowering one another. You need to stop being judgmental to other people. Stop being, you know what, you're not a critical thinker, you're actually a critical person. So 21 days of prayer, right? You can find yourself in a prayer group. And I've been around church a whole lot of time, and I've learned a lot about people in prayer groups, right? Because people take the prayer group to let everybody else know about what's going on in people's lives, right? And there's sometimes when you can be in a prayer group and somebody will talk, Lord, I pray for this couple. They weren't sitting together on Sunday, so clearly they're fighting. So I pray, God, would you restore that marriage? And everybody in the group's going, oh, they're fighting? They're having problems, right? And it's just so easy for, in the name of concern and care, to start sharing message. And we think, well, you know, hey, if it's true. But I don't read James saying, you know what, stop speaking against one another if the information is false, right? He doesn't say that. He just, stop speaking evil against, and here's the, each other interests me because it's both sides, right? It's not just the people that are being talked to. The people that are being talked about are, what are they doing? They're also talking about. So he's saying both of you that are on either side of this, like just, can you stop it? And he goes on to say, if you criticize and do what? Judge each other, right? So criticize and judge. It's this whole idea of being condescending. It's the idea of being a judgmental person. And so I came across this quote I thought was great. We love to accuse others and excuse ourselves, right? And we'll see something in someone else and go, oh, whew, you see what they're into? Horrible. And what Paul teaches us in Romans chapter 2, verse 3, he says, since you judge others for doing these things, why do you think you can avoid God's judgment? Let's just stop there. What Paul's teaching is, so you're talking about other people and their stuff, their problems, their mess, thinking that you're distracting God from what's going on where? In your own life, in your own heart. Oh, God, did you see what he said? Did you see what he did? Did you see what he wore? Didn't raise his hands in worship. Oh, danced behind the screen. Lord, forgive him, right? We make issues of things thinking that maybe that'll help us to avoid God's judgment in our lives. When you do the same things. And I find it interesting because when you see people, often what you judge in them is often what is already in your own heart. And yet we're so hard on them. Oh, if they would just figure it out. And Paul says, God doesn't forget. He sees what's going on in your life. But we relabel things so we make it kind of okay, right? I'm not a gossip. I'm just showing some concern. I'm not lazy. You know what? I'm just really relaxed. I'm not negative. I'm just being realistic. I'm not unreliable. I'm flexible. And so we replace these words with different terminology to excuse ourselves of what's going on in our own lives. And yet on other people, man, we're so hard on that. So James says, stop. Now, a lot of you have made some really critical decisions before you even got here, right? And some of them were good and some of them were not, right? You decided what time to get up. You decided what you're going to wear. Some of you even decided to shower. Thank you, all right? You make all these, is that the judgment calls that he's talking about? And that's not what James is saying. James is telling us that you need to stop slandering and gossiping and lowering one another. You need to stop being judgmental to other people. Stop being, you know what, you're not a critical thinker, you're actually a critical person. And it's really intense to hear this. But it's like James is holding up a mirror and he said, people, stop it. Stop it. So here's why we should avoid judging one another, okay? We should avoid it because we reject God's law of love. Now again, in the context of being judgmental and critical, what is this God's law all about? Well, Pastor Sean talked about this in chapter 2 of James, I think it was. The law that he's talking about is the law that says, love your neighbor as what? Yourself. So what we are doing by judging others, we're rejecting God's law, which says to love your neighbor as yourself. And so in chapter 4 here, James revisits that again and says, you're destroying people's reputation, people you should be loving. People who John 3:16 says God so loved the world that he gave his son. And then verse 17 goes on not to condemn the world. But yet for you, for some reason, it's okay to go on condemning. Okay, so someone sins. Someone's doing something that is, we look biblically, is just not right. It's not a good place. What do? Do you judge their sin? Yeah, you do. Do you tell your child that what they did was wrong? Do you sit down or you let them do it again? No, you sit down with them and you explain, hey, this isn't okay. Do you correct another believer? Listen, what I heard you did, is this right? Like, did you actually do that? Yeah. Dude, that's so not called for. Can I show you why? Let's look over the scriptures together. Because I love you, and I wanted you to live your best life with God. Totally different heart and spirit. That's love. See, the unloving thing is to let them wander without any warning, right? It's like, let's say we have a 3-year-old kid, right? Shannon comes to me, hey, you know what? He wants to go play outside. That's awesome. Let's let him out front. But Kev, this is a really busy road. He'll figure it out, right? Once he gets hit, he won't ever do that again. But can you imagine doing that with people's lives? Man, you wander out there, dude, you're going to get hit, and I can't let you do that. I love you. And so there is this place where we step in and love one another. I came across this story that I thought was interesting, so I want to share it with you, okay? It's about a woman named Ethel. She attended this church, and she was known as being the church gossip. Well, one Saturday, she's driving down the street, and as she's going downtown, she sees the truck that belonged to one of the guys that went to their church. It was parked outside a bar. Before the day was over, everyone in that little church had heard and gotten a phone call from her saying that Frank was an alcoholic. He had obviously been struggling and, only recently had probably fallen off the wagon. Of course, she added, we need to pray for Frank. And the next day when Frank showed up to church, he heard all the buzz and he heard what had been said about him. And Frank never said a single word to Ethel. He never responded to her. But late that night, he had a friend follow him over to her house, where he quietly parked his truck in her driveway and left it there overnight. I'm not encouraging that behavior, by the way. And I commend you because you got that way faster than the earlier service. So, anyway, don't pray for people you gossip about. And you probably won't gossip about the people you pray about. Mother Teresa said, if you judge people, you have no time to love them. Isn't that a great quote? Okay, so let's move on. We reject God's law of love, but we also reject our own obedience. Reading to that, but your job is to obey the law, not to judge whether it applies to you. It's not for you to judge which laws people should be living and obeying. It's not for you to look at people's lives and to say, you know what, you're doing this, but you should be doing that. Because when you do that, that's really putting you in a place where you're being very critical. And so you're choosing which law they should follow. It's like the guy who says, you know what, I'm a safe driver. I never speed, but I don't wear a seatbelt. It just doesn't make sense, right? And so these people are really setting themselves up because they're saying there's some laws that are really worth keeping and there's some laws that are unimportant. And judging is elevating ourselves and lowering others. And so we disobey the law of love. We reject that. Now, the last thing I want to share with you from verse 12 is we recognize that we are not God. When you are judgmental, you are saying you're the one. You are actually getting up to God's throne and you're wishing him over and saying, I got this. Let me help you out. It's like you're responding to a Facebook Marketplace ad that their Trinity needs some help. It's not your place to take the throne to make a judgment on someone's life. You're playing the role of God. And James is really harsh and he's kind of critical, but he's saying, you know what? These people matter. God alone, who gave the law, is the judge. He alone has the power to save or to destroy. So why are you so judgmental? Can you trust God to look after it?